Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the AthElite podcast. I'm Ross from AthElite Strength and Conditioning, and today on this podcast we have a special guest in Rafael Freitas. Um, Rafael is from the United States, so he's a athletic trainer. We know them as physiotherapists, so he works almost like a physiotherapist for a baseball club in the Major League Baseball, which is one of the major sports in America. So it's equivalent to cricket. So for Australians, it's equivalent to cricket. So it's quite a major sport. So we're pretty lucky to have Rafael on the podcast. So Rafael, welcome.
Awesome, Ross. Thanks for the intro. Looking forward to talk to you about some of what athletic training is like in the U.S. and in baseball.
So what got you into baseball?
Actually, I'm from Brazil, so obviously my favorite sport's soccer. But when I moved to the U.S., I was around 14 years old, and I just started watching baseball. I always enjoy the sport, and whenever I was in school, in athletic training school, I did a rotation for the university baseball team, and I enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the camaraderie that we had with the staff and players. I also enjoyed the challenges that working for a baseball team will provide you. I enjoyed the injuries that I had to evaluate and treat every day. So I just figured you'd be a good challenge, and just change your pace from always watching and playing soccer. So yeah, I've been in baseball since 2012, and I really enjoy it. I know there's not a lot of Brazilians in baseball, but yeah, here I am.
That's awesome. So are there any other sports? So you mentioned soccer. Have you had any strength and conditioning or sports science or any kind of like coaching role in the soccer industry as well?
In the soccer industry?
Yeah.
No. Well, as a athletic training student, I worked for the women's soccer team for a season. So I wasn't. I was just pretty much an assistant, so almost like an intern to the main athletic trainer. But we still got to do field coverage, evaluation of injuries, treating. But we were just pretty much helpers to the main athletic trainer. And when I was in graduate school here in the U.S. as well, I was a graduate assistant, but I was actually the athletic trainer for the women's soccer team there as well for 2 years. So I have had experience with soccer. I've also helped. This was a while ago with the Major League Combine. Whenever they do the physical testing, I assisted with that. But that's as much experience in soccer that I have here in the U.S.
So your time at the moment in the MLB for the Milwaukee Brewers,
Mm-hmm.
what? So just so because we're not really familiar with baseball, what does like a week of training look like? So do they do just strength training and baseball specific training, or do they do some like sprinting and conditioning and training as well, or how does that work?
So this season is going to be a different season because of COVID. So we're only doing 60 games. But let's just go back to a regular baseball season. So we actually have 162 games in around 180 days. And that's not counting preseason, which is usually around 6 to 7 weeks where we play 33 games. So without counting the playoffs, we could also be another 30 games. We almost play 200 games a year. So so we only have 18 off days throughout the calendar year, which is from from February until October 31st. So we have to manage a lot of their playing load with what we do in the weight room as well as conditioning. So I guess the answer is it all depends. If we have a guy that plays 7 games in a week, and the baseball games are long, they're around 3.5 hours, and we actually practice before every single game. So we still do defense, we do hitting. So we have to manage their workload with their weight room time, but at the same time, we understand that we have to keep them. We have to do stuff in the weight room because, or else they're just going to break. So we have a lot of strategies that we use to kind of balance their playing load with the load that they're doing in the weight room, as well as conditioning. But overall, there's different phases that we give our athletes throughout the year. Obviously, we have some deload phases, but overall, we do conditioning, weight room, and we pretty much play every single day.
Yeah, so it's massive loads, especially for a sport that requires so much power. It's not quite, we'll compare it to soccer, so it's not quite the endurance and the amount of kilometres that they cover in soccer. However, I'm assuming there's lots of travel because America is such a big country, and so even just traveling and playing pretty much every day and traveling, that'll take its toll enough. Let alone your recovery and all your other components as well. So on this topic, so with a club like that, you'd almost assume that they'd all live together, wouldn't they? Almost.
So there's not a lot of players from our team that live in Milwaukee or around, just because the winters are so brutal. So usually they live, I say 95% of our athletes live somewhere else, and they move to Milwaukee during the season. So, and they usually live with their families. If we have a couple young players, they may live with each other, but I say the majority of them actually live on their own. They sometimes either rent a house or an apartment, or some players even buy a house and an apartment where they only live during the season, and then when the season's done, they go back home to wherever they live.
So with these baseball athletes, because they've probably got some of the best reflexes in the world, or their ability to read cues, I guess, because those hitters, you can't just react to a shot. You almost have to anticipate a shot. Is that something you guys work at like? There wouldn't be a whole lot of training, but is that something that they work on a lot? Trying to develop their reflexes, or is it just something practice and practice? Hitting a ball, and you're just going to be able to read cues better.
Right. I mean, yeah, like you said, these guys, their hand-eye coordination is absolutely incredible. The fact that they can hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and then be able to determine that the pitcher's throwing a curveball or a slider or a changeup. These are all different types of pitches that have different types of movements. And obviously they don't know what's coming, but these guys are so fast and they're so intelligent and they're so athletic that they can actually recognize those pitches and actually put a good swing in it. But there are some athletes that they do some vision training and some reflex training. But it's usually up to the athlete to do that. We obviously, there are drills that we can do with them, but at the same time, it's not something that we implement. It's on a player-to-player basis. Some of them actually have routines to train their vision every day. It's almost like a warm-up to their eyes. Not a lot of people think about the eye as a muscle, but it actually is, so before they start hitting, throwing, some of our guys, we do some drills. It could be as simple as following their fingers with their eyes, or looking side to side really fast, just to kind of warm up their vision and their nervous system as well.
It is quite interesting because it's definitely a new philosophy I've heard of anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so these guys they're definitely incredible, and how it's insane to see how hard and how far the ball actually goes when they make solid contact. So, and they're very skilled individuals, and they're 0.001% of the population that can actually do what they do.
So, in the weights room, is most of their training, would it be lower body power? Would it be, you'd assume it'll be upper body power training and upper body strength training, but is there much of a lower body um, aspect that goes into it as well, or is it 50-50? What would the ratio be?
I would say obviously we work out upper and lower body, but over 70% of their power comes from the lower body, either pitching or hitting. Because with pitching you're pushing off, and with hitting you're loading. So and by lower extremity I include pretty much the torso and down, because as you can expect, there's a lot of rotation and movement. So we do train a lot of power and a lot of rotation as well, because that is pretty much the bread and butter that these guys do every day. But obviously, we don't neglect upper body, but especially for pitchers, they have very specific lifts just because of the amount of mobility that they have to have in their upper body. And we also want to make sure that they are able to go through the pitching motion. So there are some exercises that we do less than others, just to optimize their athletic movement, as opposed to, we don't want to bulk these guys to be football players. These are baseball players that have very specific mechanics, and I'd say that baseball is the most mechanically specific sport that there is, and it's very fine-tuned movements that these guys perform every day. So a lot of the stuff that we do, there's a lot of power, but it's a lot of baseball specific power and in the weight room.
So how many players or guys are on a squad, and how many are on the field at one time?
So again, this year is different because of COVID, so they had to change the roster size a little bit. But it's usually 25. It's a 25-man roster. Usually we have 13 pitchers and 12 position players, and we have 9 players on the field at all times.
So what kind of injuries can you expect with these athletes? Because you'd think there'd be a lot of rotator cuff and shoulder injuries, but are there any lower, because you, as you just said, with using your lower extremity a fair bit, is there any lower extremity injuries, like a lot of knee injuries, ankle injuries, and hip injuries, or is it mainly rotator cuff and shoulder injuries?
So for pitchers, you see a lot of shoulder injuries, and I'm not sure if you have ever heard of the infamous Tommy John surgery. That is a surgery of the elbow. It's whenever the ulnar collateral ligament gets compromised and you need surgery. So that's probably the big one, is the elbow Tommy John surgery. But so with pitchers, you actually get a lot of core injuries too, just because of the velocity of the rotation that they have, and some of the lower body issues that they have is adductor strains from pushing off the mound. So I'd say those are the top 3 for pitchers. Now for hitters, believe it or not, hamstring is the number one cause of lost time in position players in the MLB. I don't know if you ever watched a baseball game. It's kind of like cricket, but there's a lot of stoppage in between, a forceful sprint. So, and I wouldn't say it's an epidemic, but there's a lot of hamstring injuries in these baseball players, especially hitters. So with hitting comes a lot of rotation too, which also causes for some core injuries. And then a lot of these guys get hit by baseballs, and that's always up there on the injury scale. But so hamstrings is number one. core, and these position players, they're throwing you as well from the outfield or from the infield. So you eventually get some shoulder injuries as well.
So is it more to do with the burst of acceleration, that initial that burst, like first 5 meters, or is it more once they hit top speed with these hamstring injuries?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the answer is both. But for the most part, is whenever they are reaching the top speed and reaching first base. So whenever you so from home is where they're hitting, and to first base is 30 meters. So whenever they're around 20 to 25 meters, that's when they reach their max speed. And a lot of these guys, if it's a close play at home play, they will actually lunge forward and try to extend their knee to hit the base faster. So that's usually a mechanism. So you're pretty much eccentrically elongating the hamstring, trying to get to the base faster. So that's a big mechanism as well. So I'd say that's it's probably a 70% chance of the hamstring strain happening when you're getting to that maximal speed and getting to first base, and about 30% when you're breaking off a standing position to an acceleration phase. But that's a really good question.
So with your shoulder injuries, and this will probably be a little bit more differently, or the different etiology and mechanics, I guess.
Yeah.
Will that be more to do with overuse because they're throwing the ball so many times and just wear and tear, or is that to do with similar as a hamstring, how it's you might be cooling down the muscle and all of a sudden you have to do a maximal contraction?
Definitely overuse, and sometimes you get a guy that may start feeling something early, and they just think that they can push through it, and it progressively gets worse, and then they only report the injury whenever it's to the point of pretty much I can't pitch anymore. But usually guys are pretty good about, hey, I'm feeling something a little naggy. Can we start working on something? But it's shoulders are definitely overused. I'm not, obviously there are cases where it's an acute, like an acute pitch, or if you land on your shoulder. But with a throwing athlete, it's mostly overused. They will start small and then eventually become something bigger. And it's always a battle because we play almost every day, so it's tough to shut down a guy for a long time, because obviously I think the way that we measure success in our profession in the major leagues is the rate of availability of players every day. If we can have them ready every day for 162 games, I feel like we've done our job. Whenever we put a player on an injury list, which is 10 days where they can't participate, that is a big burden to our club. So we try to communicate with these guys to let us know if something's bothering them early, so we can start treating, so it doesn't become something big to the point where we have to put them in the injury list. There are times where players may play with a little soreness or a little discomfort, but the earlier that we can detect this and work on it, it's obviously the better and the better prognosis. But like you said, most of the shoulder injuries that we have, they're overuse, and sometimes it's a battle. It's sometimes a season-long battle, but sometimes, unfortunately, we have to shut these guys down, give the area some time to cool off, and then progress them back to activity.
So with these injuries and trying to prevent these injuries, or I don't know if you can prevent these injuries because it's more of a you just got to manage them. But what risk factors are you looking at to make sure that these guys don't get these overuse injuries in their shoulders?
So that's also a very good question, and so obviously we do a screening process before the season, and so there's a few risk factors that we look at. Number one, I wouldn't say number one, but in no particular order, rotator cuff strength is a big one. Mostly external rotation. Most of these guys they have internal rotation strength for days. Now, external rotation is usually the motion where these guys lack. Um, Obviously, we want to have a good ratio between internal and external. If it is 50-50, great. Also, extreme external rotation and 90 degrees, it's another huge risk factor. If you have a lot of external rotation, you compromise a lot of other structures, especially because when you're pitching, you are always in external rotation. So if you have a lot of passive external rotation, whenever you're pitching, you have even more. So that is a big risk factor. And we usually analyze a scapular path in your rib cage. That is a big one as well. So we like to have a smooth scap that rides up and down your rib cage with movement. Sometimes you see scap that wings. Sometimes you see scap that have fluttering movements. That is a big one. But also we look at lower body strength because, like I told you before, 70% of their power and their pitching comes from the lower body. So if somebody has great external rotation, they have adequate strength, but they have no power of explosion, the shoulder is going to be compromised as well. So it is a whole body evaluation that we do on these guys. We always, if we work on these red flags, are we always going to avoid injuries? No chance. But I think that by having a program, by having a routine, I think that we diminish the likelihood of somebody going down.
So with these, what was it? Was it 160 odd games they play? How many games on average would a player like an athlete play? Because I'd assume that no one would play every single game. They'd have to have and be managed, at least half a dozen, or there'd be a certain number of games that have off. But what would be the average that someone would play? Someone healthy anyway.
So actually, last year in the Major League Baseball, I think there were 2 or 3 players that played every single day, which is quite a feat. But I would say that for a position player, a non-pitcher, if you play around 150 games, that is on the high end of games. I'd say average is around 130, 145. But for pitchers, it's different. And when I say pitchers, I mean I'm assuming they'd be the bowlers for cricket.
Yeah,
correct.
Spot on. Yep, 100%.
So here in the U.S., there are different pitchers with different roles. So the starting pitcher is the pitcher that starts the game, and we have 9 innings, which is kind of like 9 periods. I don't know how cricket works, but I'm going to try to explain as fast as I can. So each half an inning, there's 3 outs, and as soon as you get those 3 outs, the other team gets a chance to hit, and whenever they get 3 outs, that finishes an inning. So there's 9 of those throughout the game. If the game is tied after 9, then you go into extra innings until somebody wins. So the starting pitcher is the guy that starts the game, and he's the pitcher that goes the longest. So usually a quality start for a pitcher is around 6 or 7 innings. And then we go to the relief pitchers, which they'll usually come in for about 1 to 2 innings. And then we have a closer. A closer is usually that guy that comes in whenever the team is winning, and he's got to come down and shut the game for us. Obviously, for us, we want guys to play 162 games. That's our goal. But and sometimes the manager will sit guys down. They won't play them because of strategic reasons. Sometimes a player doesn't perform well against another team or against a certain pitcher. So, but making them available every game it's our main goal.
No, you answered that perfectly, Rafael. thank you very much, and we might have you again for another episode maybe down the line, and all the best with the Milwaukee Brewers in the season that's just about to start. So thank you very much, Rafael.
Of course, Ross. Thanks for having me. It was fun. So yeah, looking forward to doing this again.
That